so on 4A, we're going to finish up the part we didn't finish last time. And that is phylum Cnidaria. And then we'll move into 4B, which is Ctenophora, the marine worms. Okay, everybody in the right place? It's halfway down the page on 4A. Yeah. Because I wanted to spend so much time on sponges last time. That's all we talked about, remember? Okay. All right, here we go. I don't know why this isn't working. Okay, so remember we talked about symmetry. So once again, we're going to be looking at critters today. We're going to actually have our first dissection today. All right, so hopefully everybody's ready for that. It's pretty creepy. Yeah, it's really creepy. Yeah. All right, so remember we have bilateral symmetry like we see in this beetle here. We can have radial symmetry in the top of this polyp. Also a sea urchin. But remember our sponge, last time we looked at that, had no symmetry. And then we can see true radial symmetry, spherical like this. Looks like a Volvox colony or something. Okay, so we're looking at phylum Cnidaria. All right, so our example for this, and your blank for example would be a jellyfish, a sea anemone, a coral. Any of those would do for that. So we'll be looking at each one of these. You probably know at least about the jellyfish. These are stingers, right? These guys sting you.
When we write things like anemone, do you require that we have the sea part on it, or is it just anemone?
The sea part.
Like sea anemone.
Oh, sea anemone. I'll understand that it's the sea anemone. So. I thought you were going to ask me, what if you misspell it? I will not count off her misspelled word. As long as I have Jeopardy rules, as long as I know what you're trying to say. Okay, so I would start the word anemone with an A. That would be helpful. All right, here we go. We got a lot of writing to do today, y'all. So they're also known as coelenterates. All right, coelenterates. And coelenterates means a large body cavity. So each one of these in the Cnidaria are going to have a large body cavity and then some sort of opening. They have specialized tissues that perform specific tasks. The word tissue is underlined, which makes me think there's a blank. No?
No?
Oh, too bad.
Motion, symmetry, reproduction, and characteristics.
Okay. They have the ability to move more intricately than sponges. They can be motile. They can move, but they're still considered planktonic. Okay, so they can't overcome the current. Even though if they were in a place with no current, like you put them in a fish tank or something, they could move. You get it? So they're still considered planktonic. So their locomotion would be plankton. They're floaters. All right, they display radial symmetry. There it is. Radial symmetry. No true head, front or back. They have an oral side, and that's where their mouth is, and an aboral side, the other side. They have sexual reproduction, resulting in something called a planula, a free-swimming planula. We'll see some pictures here in just a minute. Let's see, we have these two body types, body shapes, one called a polyp and one called a medusa. And they can both reproduce sexually, but polyps reproduce asexually. We're going to see, you're going to understand what I'm talking about here, the polyp and the medusa form. How they look different and then they actually act different as well. Okay, but you don't have a place to write that, huh? About polyp and medusa. You heard the word medusa before? What does it remind you of? The lady with the snakes for hair, right? Yeah, snakes for hair. And we're going to see why. It looks like this. It actually looks like this one right here. All right, so there are two basic body forms in phylum Cnidaria. The polyp form is this one down here. It has a barrel-like appearance, and it's attached usually to a substrate. Okay, so it stands upward, and its little tentacle mouth, oral side is facing upward. That's typically what you see on a sea anemone. And it's usually attached to something. The medusa is the free-swimming one stage with the appearance of a bell or an umbrella. That's this one, so its oral side is underneath. It's like this. This should remind you of a jellyfish. I have a jellyfish for us to look at today, but it's really not much to it. It's just a blob. So we'll take a look at it just for fun. Some cnidarians will express both stages during their life cycle. In other words, they might start at the polyp stage, and as they grow older, they turn into the medusa stage. Others stay the same their whole lives, depending on what they were looking at. Both forms have a central mouth surrounded by tentacles, and these tentacles have these cool little stinging things on them that will neutralize their prey. It'll stun them, and then they'll be able to eat them. So they'll use them as like appendages to put into their mouths. And we'll see nematocysts closer here in just a second. They're digested in the gastrovascular cavity. That's that barrel right there. It's not a true gut because there's no exit for it. It doesn't exit anywhere. All right, so we'll see there. Here's our polyp stage. Here's our medusa stage. The medusa stage is much like an upside down polyp. Take that one, turn it upside down. In both stages, a centrally located mouth is surrounded by food-capturing tentacles, and the tentacles have stinging structures called nematocysts. That's an important word. They have a jelly-like body layer called the mesoglia, kind of like the sponge had, like that space in between the two sides. Sandwiched between the tissue layers called the ectoderm and the endoderm, and they're usually carnivorous. They're going to eat fish, other little animals swim by. Some exhibit, like I said before, both stages, the medusa and the polyp stage. Most famously will be our jellyfish. Okay, so the jellyfish will go through both stages. So when we look at the jellyfish life cycle, let me get my book out. Okay, yeah, so that y'all just have some, whatever general information you're going to write down about them. So here we go. So here is our polyp stage. Let's start with our zygote down here at the bottom, and it'll replicate into a blastula and then a plangula. So there's our plangula, and then it will turn into this polyp stage with the mouth right there. Then it'll go through asexual reproduction, producing the medusa stage with the mouth down below, going through the fertilization and sexual reproduction stage. So therefore you see in this we have our alternation of generation in the jellyfish, which is how we get both the polyp and the medusa stages in this one particular creature. All that complexity going on in a jellyfish, yes.
When it says characteristics and it has a blank, what exactly do you want us to
I think I probably want you to put in those words polyp and medusa. Have those written somewhere, please. All right, so you can see they're spelled here, polyp, P-O-L-Y-P, and medusa, M-E-D-U-S-A. USA. All right, now we're going to look at some of the different groups that are in here. All right, so we have our three classes. We have class Hydrozoa right over here. We're going to see an interesting little group over there called the man of war. Scyphozoa right here, that's our classic jellyfish. And Anthozoa, that's our classic sea anemone. We have these other ones too, but apparently our book is not too interested in those guys. And you'll have a place for all three of these?
For an example.
Okay, so an example of Hydrozoa then would be the man of war. Portuguese man of war. Man of war. Man o' war. I'm going to bring these up separately too, so y'all can, if y'all have another one you want to put on there. For our Scyphozoa, it is jellyfish. And for Anthozoa would be a sea anemone or an anemone, if you like. All right, so let's take a look at them. Here's our Hydrozoa. There's over 3,000 different species here. They have various body types. They do have both polyp and medusa forms. Most form colonies of tiny polyps. So you can see a creature right here. Each one of those are individuals living in a colony. The colonies tend to divide the labor between feeding and reproductive life cycle times. And the hydra would be a really good example of this one. So this is a glowing, stained hydra under a microscope right here. Last time we talked a little bit about reproduction and budding, and the hydra's famous for budding through that asexual reproduction right here. Now it's called a hydra because it's got all these little things off here Okay, and if you cut it off, another one will grow back, which reminds us of the ancient Greek creature, the Hydra. Who was fighting it? Odysseus, and he cut off the head and two grew back in its place, or something like this. So that's what it's referring to. That's why it's called that. Here's what one would look like under the microscope. And you can see the mouth part and the tentacle. So what form is this in?
Medusa?
Actually, it's
polyp,
it's the polyp because it's
the other
facing
direction.
upward, right? And it's not free floating; it's attached, right? And you can see right here, this would be one of those little buds, one of those little asexual reproductive parts right there. This is a pretty famous one. This is the Portuguese man of war. So you've probably heard of these guys. They're the ones that'll sting you really badly. It turns out that it's actually a colony. They do have this really cool pneumatophore. It's like a little sail that they fill with gas, and so it floats on the top of the water, which is fortunate. If you've ever been swimming with jellyfish, they tend to sneak up on you, yeah? And they're under there, and you're like, you really only notice them after you've been stung. Well, these guys are floating on the top. So therefore, if they're floating up there, stay away. You don't want to be near these guys. Every one of those is a different little colony with a different little set of stingers right here. The stingers are pretty long. They are that colorful. Here is a man who was attacked by one, yeah. So it left those scars on him. So no fun there to get these stung by the Portuguese man of war. I'm assuming, they're over there in the Portugal area. I'm guessing. All right. Scyphozoa, we have the largest and most representative, the largest group would be the jellyfish. So here's just a general idea of what some jellyfish look like. They spend almost all their life as medusae, it's plural of medusa, right? So they're in the medusa form, but they do have both forms during reproduction. They swim, yet they're still planktonic. Our example would be our classic jellyfish, including the ones we have down at the coast. Here's a couple of different ones. Our sea nettle, pretty. Pelagia, cannonball, you can see why it's called that. The lion's mane, that thing's like is tall from the floor to the ceiling. It's there, and then all those little tentacles coming out. I've had pictures showing like a diver swimming near it. Their tentacles aren't super, actually they can be super long, but some of them I've seen are short. They look kind of furry, kind of fuzzy like a mane. All right, this is called the box jellyfish. This is in Australia. You know what about Australia? There's more venomous and deadly things per square foot than anywhere in the whole wide world. Well, this is one of them. This is one you get stung by, you probably won't even have a chance to get to the hospital in time to save you. All right, so it's highly, venomous, and so it kills humans. So stay away from the box jelly. Maybe if you're in Australia, which I don't know if anybody's going to Australia soon, it's totally locked down, country's locked down. You might want to check with somebody before getting in any water. Yeah. Here's somebody, I guess, who made it, or they could be on the autopsy table. Huh.
That looks like an autopsy table.
Possibly, yeah. So there's just some evidence of those stings right there. I can't remember. I think I have a little video here just of some, I'm going to show them actually swimming. Pretty graceful. Sure if I have another video. Oh yeah.
Just offshore, a hidden world of translucent beings. Among them lurks a killer. The lion's mane. largest jellyfish. "60-foot stinging tentacles snare the throbbing moon jellies. But this giant isn't invincible. Throngs of carnivorous anemones crowd the underwater cliffs. Get too close, and there's no escaping. Millions of sticky little arms grab at his tentacles. The lion's mane is reeled in and eaten alive by 100 hungry mouths.
So, there you go.
Was that Tom Selleck narrating that? It sounded like
Don't
it.
know. Don't know for sure. Okay, so that was these creatures who seem so harmless, right? Well, except for that poor jellyfish. Okay. So the largest group of the cnidarians are in class Anthozoa. Those are our anemone. And you can see they can be solitary or colonial. I think what we saw in the video just then was a big colony of them. Examples would be corals also in addition to the sea anemone. It looks like this. This is the one thing, the sea anemone is the one specimen that I ordered that got back ordered. So we don't have any sea anemone. We weren't going to dissect it today anyway. It was going to be dissected when we get to the region where they live. So maybe by then it will have come in. Here's one showing how the tentacles on top, right? So they're definitely in the polyp form. And then the stalk, and they usually attach themselves to something. Here's one you can see the mouth right there, and the tentacles that would feed, of course, everything into the mouth. Here is a very close-up picture of some of those tentacles, and out of there would come those nematocysts, which we're getting to. We know, of course, the great symbiosis story of the clownfish and the anemone. And it turns out the clownfish has a certain, or lacks actually, a certain enzyme that doesn't allow it to feel the sting. So I think the nematocysts are sending out, but anyway, it's mutualistic. It helps to attract other fish toward the anemone, and of course it helps protect the fish. Here you can see one actually eating a big old crab. So that's quite an ambitious meal right there for that anemone. All right, let's look at the nematocysts. Here's an actual picture of it right here, these little guys right here. And so they literally have a little barbed harpoon that is wound up in here, and there's a little door right here. And so when the door gets hit, it actually opens up this operculum, this little door, and lets cold water into it. And when the cold water gets into it, it causes it to launch out and then sting. And notice it has a barb in it, so when it gets in you, it stays in you. All right, so if you've ever been stung by these guys before, it stings for a while, right? It tends to sting for a while. All right, let's watch. This is really great. This is a high-speed photography that's catching these guys being stuck.
Hey, it's me, Destin, and welcome back to Smarter Every Day. If you've ever been stung by a jellyfish, you know that it's awful. Let me show you. So there's two ways that an animal can harm a human chemically, right? The first one is poison. We know what that is. Like, if I were to eat this jellyfish and it was poisonous and I were to get sick, it's because it is a poisonous animal, right? Now, venom is different. Venom is injected into your body. So it's kind of like these hypodermic needles. If you fill them up with venom and then you were to take that and inject that into your arm, that would be a venomous way of causing pain to your body, right? So wouldn't it be crazy if there was like hypodermic needles built into their tentacles and they could just stab you with them as soon as they rubbed up against you? Because that's exactly what happens. Jellyfish tentacles have organelles in them called nematocysts. They're like little hypodermic needles. And when you're swimming and those hypodermic needles brush up against your body, they stab into you and inject venom. It's insane. People have never seen these because they're so small you have to have a microscope, and they're so fast that you have to use a high-speed camera. So now that we've rounded these two things up, where do we find our jellyfish? Check it out. I'm at James Cook University in Australia, in Cairns, and here's the deal. I've got the doctor here that's the world expert in animal venom. It's pretty cool. Let's go check it out. His name is Dr. Jamie Seymour. So we have a high-speed camera here, and we're running HD SDI video out, and then Richard is recording it real time, and then Dr. Seymour here is going to try to trigger a nematocyst, correct? Correct. And once you trigger it, we're going to try to catch it on high speed.
So if you look at an anemone, we'll just open this out of an anemone, and if you poke it in the side,
So this isn't a jellyfish.
it's related to jellyfish.
Close enough.
Yeah.
Okay, I told everybody wrong. I said we're going to learn how jellyfish sting.
Well,
This
it's the same
isn't...
thing. It's the same process.
Oh, is it?
That's like saying, okay, we're going to work out how a bullet works today. Here's an AK-47, and then if I walk in with a Glock, it's the same process.
You are speaking my language, Australia man.
There you go.
There you go. All
So
right.
we're still not exactly sure what causes the nematocyst to fire, but what we do know is if we touch 2 leads from a 9-volt battery to the tentacle itself, we can get some of them to randomly fire, which allows us to record it with a Phantom high-speed camera.
Trigger it goes!
Trigger. How long have you been trying to capture that?
Well, we've been doing it for a fair number of years, but we've never had the camera technology to actually do it at this level before. The nematocyst, which is a cell organelle, so it's inside a cell, which is a ball with a wound-up hypodermic needle in it. And we saw it basically discharge. So
And the needle is not rigid necessarily.
that's correct. Think of it like a garden hose,
Okay.
no pressure. And then when you apply pressure to it, the whole thing straightens out.
Got it.
So what we saw there is the whole thing fired off. You got some sort of idea of how quick that was.
Right.
But the thing that blew me away was the time lag from when the thing discharged to when we saw the venom.
Yeah, it was like a third of a second.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
never seen that before. I mean, we've seen venom come out the end of these things.
Right.
We've never seen that delay, but we've never looked for it.
You're digging this, aren't you?
Oh, this is cool. This is like real science. This is the sort of stuff I get up in the morning for.
Are you implying that I don't do real science?
No. You do the same thing. There are times you get up in the morning, I'm sure, and you just go, I so want to go to work today because I'm going to find out something new.
Right.
And isn't that what you do it?
Right. It is.
I mean, seriously, I would do this stuff for free.
Yeah.
It's the joy of actually coming and going, I just saw something that nobody else in the world has ever seen before.
It's kind of selfish.
Yeah, but then you can teach people about it.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's,
I do.
Look, I've got goosebumps all over me just from that sort of thing. It's great. It's exactly why I do this sort of stuff.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That's Dr. Seymour, venomologist.
Toxinologist!
Toxinologist. I'm never going to get it right.
So from now on, when you think about jellyfish, I hope you don't think about just slimy tentacles dragging poison on your skin. It's actually an organelle called a nematocyst containing venom that takes it and actually shoves it into your body and then injects the venom. I'm just kidding, I didn't actually squirt that in me. But it's pretty intense. I hope I didn't ruin the beach for you. The people at James Cook University asked me if I would inform you that they are looking for undergrad and grad students. They need people to help them figure out how to solve the box jelly venom mystery. It's a cardiotoxin. It kills the heart, but they don't really know how or why. So if you're interested in studying, go to James Cook University. I think their motto is like the Explorers of the Tropics, which is pretty cool. Anyway, I'm Destin. Go check them out.
All right, so here we're looking a little closer. This, I believe, are some corals with their little polyps right there, and the little nematocysts right there on the ends of those. And another one, also a coral. And there's a coral reef, of course, yeah. All right, so I thought we were going to watch a jellyfish video. That's not. All right, now it's Module 4B. So we're going to look at phylum Ctenophora as the first group we're looking at. That was the lab last week.
Oh, okay.
We're going to talk about the comb jellies. They're an example of phylum Ctenophora. They have radial symmetry. They have gelatinous bodies. They're planktonic, that's their mode of moving. All right, they eat smaller plankton. They have two long tentacles to capture their prey, right? These kind of feathery looking things coming out there. And instead of nematocysts, these tentacles have what are known as lasso cells. They release a sticky thread, it latches onto the prey and pulls them in. They have 8 rows of ciliary combs. Those are inside right here. We're going to see some pictures of those here in a minute. They aid in locomotion. Cilia, remember, are like little hairs they're moving, so these little hairs are moving back and forth. And then they're hermaphrodites. That means they're sexual reproduction, but they have both male and female parts. All right, so we'll see that again in other creatures. Worms, namely.
Aren't frogs?
Frogs, no, frogs can just, their sex can change based on the temperature at which they hatch. All right, so are these blanks you're filling in, or are these just a few things you're writing down?
Some blanks.
Oh, there are blanks?
Locomotion, eating, reproduction, and symmetry.
Oh, yeah, but they're not the blanks like fill in the blank. No, okay. Yeah. I guess that's upper level course, right? No more filling in the blanks. Okay, let's take a look at. Oh, there's what they look like. That's just a picture of them. Okay, these ones you can't really see their long tentacles because they may have pulled them in. They can pull them in if they need to. And then these are those cilia that are moving. And I know I have a video of it. All right, so you can see there the cilia moving, right? And that does help them keep afloat, gives them some locomotive assistance there. Once again, I don't really see as large. You must not be in a feeding stage at this point. Not putting those out for feeding. All right, there we go. That was Ctenophora, so that's all we have for that one. Now we have Platyhelminthes. The Platyhelminthes, these are going to be our bilateral worms, our worms. Look how pretty that one is right there. They have a more complex tissue set, forming some organs. Notably, they have some ganglia, which we consider a brain. Okay, so we really haven't talked about brains to this point. They have bilateral symmetry. That's why they're called bilateral worms. The top side is called the dorsal side. That's probably something you just need to remember the rest of the year, that the back top side is dorsal. The easiest way to remember that is a shark has a dorsal fin, right? So that's the back. And then the belly side would be called the ventral side, okay? Like, for instance, today we're going to dissect this worm, and not this worm, not as pretty as that. You're going to have a ventral approach, right? So that means you're going to cut into the belly of the worm. Okay. They have hydrostatic skeleton. That means they can fill cavities with fluid, allowing for motion, sort of almost like an amoeba, but not quite as fluid as an amoeba, but it can push fluid in between them and cause himself to move a little bit. All right, so that would be their mode of motion right there, hydrostatic motion, just manipulating the water inside their bodies. All right, so we have the examples. Another example would be a flatworm. So this one's pretty flat. Look, it's pretty colors though. They're thin. They can actually go through osmosis to get some of the nutrients and things that they need. They're often parasitic. You might have heard of a fluke or a tapeworm. Tapeworm, they're not marine, of course. Well, the fluke is, but not the tapeworm necessarily. It's not necessarily marine. But they're flatworms that tend to be parasitic. In the ocean, we tend to see them in really beautiful colors. All right, so this is called the planaria. All right, and the planaria is a classic flatworm. It is a marine creature, but I believe they also live in fresh water. All right, so we'll find those in fresh water. Now they're really cool looking. Here's a picture of one right here, okay? So you notice about them. When I was in high school, I was able to dissect one of these guys, but interestingly, I dissected it while it was alive. Okay, and you might think that's horrible, how cruel, but the deal is about these guys is if you cut them right in half like this, you'll grow 2 new worms. Okay, so cutting them while they're alive, now if they're dead, of course they won't do that, they have to be alive to do that. And so our goal, now these guys are not very big, you can see them with your eye, but they're about this big, about, I'm going to say 1.5 inches long. And so our goal was to try to cut them right down the middle. Now I tell you, this was very difficult because they're moving. I don't know that they're super excited about being cut in half, you know, so they're, you know, squirming and this kind of thing. But we would cut them in half and then we would watch them over the next weeks and see how they grew another side right back. So pretty cool stuff. And you of course notice their cute little eye spots right there. They look like little cross-eyed creatures. They are just eye spots in the sense that they can sense where light is, and then they can go toward creatures that are doing photosynthesis and things. He doesn't do photosynthesis, but he might eat those guys. Here's one that's been cut back there, right? There's the eye spots on the right side there, and you see how it's going to grow into two. All right, here's a fluke, nasty. These are mostly parasitic. A lot of times we'll find those actually internally in fish and things like that, but you can see how gross they are, yeah. Here's a fish, poor fish, with all those little things along the side there. Those are all little flukes on the outside of him. It's a beautiful fish, but he's being attacked by these, even on his eyeballs right there. I believe this fish had washed up, had died possibly of being infected. Tapeworms, these are parasitic. Here's what their mouth looks like. So what they will do, and these are like little suction cups, so the mouth will hook onto you, and those little suction cups will hold on. They live usually in intestines, and they'll hold on and they'll suck your blood too. Yes?
In these boxes, were we supposed to draw them? Or
What do the boxes say?
They don't say the names of the.
I think you're giving an example of them. Okay. So did we get what tubularia was? Trematoda were the flukes. Tubularia is a planarian. That's the tubularia. These are different classes, right? You're not supposed to draw them.
oh.
If you want to draw them, feel free to. Then our trematoda is our flukes. You just write flukes down in there. You might want to say mostly parasitic. Here we have our cestoda. Is that one of them?
Yes.
That's the last one. Okay, great. All right, flatworms, tapeworms. Tapeworms.
Is that all one word?
Yes, yes, they're very long. They tend to like sit in your intestines and yeah.
Oh.
So that's like I said earlier. That's their mouth part, and they're suctioning onto you. So they're quite parasitic. Humans can get tapeworm infestation, infection, and it's not good. They don't kill you typically, but it's not good. It's never good to have parasites. All right, so mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. This is just a review of these apparently. Where we see that if they're commensal, one receives a benefit, the other one's not affected. Mutualism, they both benefit. Parasitism, we have one harm. So remember, some of these flatworms are parasitic. They are going to harm their host. And so in a parasitic situation, a tapeworm is parasitic. So eventually, it's going to cause enough harm to the host to sap all of their nutrients. Basically, they're going to steal their nutrients from them. I'm going to practice shortening things so you don't. Your college professor's not going to wait on you. I am recording this, by the way, though. If you want to have the recording, you just have to let me know, and then you may have to remind me. So, all right. Nematera are the ribbon worms, and they have a harpoon proboscis. So, what is a proboscis? It's their mouth parts. Okay. So here we can see that this is the creature. This is a drawing of it. We have the mouth down here, and this is the gut. And it's a true gut because there's an anus. In other words, something comes out the other end. We can see that this little proboscis thing comes out to help feed them. So it's part of their mouth. Here it is. we're gonna watch a little video on this. This guy is to me seriously creepy. So let's take a look. This, I believe, is a video showing, yeah, this is a guy holding on to one. I wouldn't hold on to it. You're gonna see his proboscis come out here in a minute.
Maybe I should push it. Can I push it?
Oh my goodness!
Have you ever seen one of these?
I've never seen that.
That's so nasty.
That's
Oh.
gross.
Yes, it is.
Because they have those little biting, teeth at the end of that little beak at the end.
There you go. Nice. Hanging off me here.
Gross. All right, nematoda are the roundworms. The roundworms. If you've ever had a puppy, take him to the vet and they said, yeah, he's got roundworms. That's the same group here. But these are, of course, the marine roundworms that we're talking about here. By the way, the worm is this thing. This is a roundworm. That's a poor beetle that's being attacked by it. So this is probably not a marine one, but they are parasitic. They, if you eat raw fish, who likes sushi? Yeah, you gotta make sure you know where it comes from. Okay, you don't want any. You'll get nematodes from it. I mean, excuse me, yeah, the nematodes. That's right. Yes.
Are roundworms and ringworms the same thing?
No, ringworm is actually not a worm at all. It's a fungus. Yeah, fungal infection. Yeah. So here you can see. Oh, this is a special kind of one of the roundworms. It's really kind of interesting. It's called the innkeeper worm. Yeah, and that's because you can see these holes right here. He's built this pretty elaborate little cave system right here, and so he's called the fat innkeeper, right? And so what he does is, you notice here we had a hole here and a hole here, so he has several little entries in there. And so what happens is he lives down in here, and he waits for a critter to fall down into his little lair, and then he goes and, munches on him, right? So this says a crab. It was big enough to catch a crab down in there. It must be a small crab. And a little bitty whatever critter that is. It even said little tiny fish, little goby fish right there, can fit in there. And the innkeeper would say, oh, it's nice to check you in, and he'll go. They say, what's for dinner? You are. Okay, so there's one right there.
Sorry.
All right, the annelida. Okay, so the annelida are going to be our segmented worms. That's the word you want to write down there, segmented worms. Marine sandworm. That's what we're dissecting today, y'all. A marine sandworm. And it looks not as pretty as this one. They're kind of creepy, actually. They're a complete body cavity with a gut system called a cecum. We'll see that word again, a cecum. They also have a circulatory system and a nervous system. So we're getting higher up in organization here, okay? We're getting a little more sophisticated body types here. And they have a ganglia as well. A ganglia would be considered their brain. Not that they're super smart, but they do have nerves. Nerves for not necessarily thinking so much, but sensory. Sensory nerves. All right. So annelida, you might recognize that word because in Biology 1, you probably dissected an earthworm, right? That's also in annelida. In other words, it's also a segmented worm. So we'll see the segments like we saw on your big earthworm previously. It'll look similar, but it has all these interesting little thingies along the side there. Feet, or whatever you're going to call them. So here's our anatomy. We're going to try to see if we can see that really lovely mouth region there as we dissect, okay? It's going to be pretty small, but you're going to try for that. And then we're going to do a ventral approach and cut open the belly and see if we can see any of the structures inside, including the pharynx, which will be part of the digestive system. The septum would be something separating the segments. The esophagus, the pharynx turns into the esophagus. Nephridium along the sides here. The nephridium are kind of like little kidneys. Listen. The intestine coming along through here. Our blood vessel, a nerve cord even. Those will be pretty small. So you see a blood vessel at the top. That is the dorsal, dorsal blood vessel. And the nerve cord is ventral. So be looking for that when you make your cut in there. So you're going to be opening it up like this. Hopefully, y'all are going to have brand new, very sharp scalpel blades. All right. So the biggest problem with those is that you tend to cut all the way through your specimen. Okay, and you want to refrain from doing it. You want to cut very gently and just try to get that top layer open so you can spread that out, open it up, and see what's in there. And hopefully we'll be able to find all of these structures. Hopefully it'll look as good as that right there. All right, but let's finish up with our polychaetes right here. It's a type of segmented worm. It's a class of segmented worms called the polychaetes, also known as tube worms and fan worms. All right, so they have bristles. They also have gills. So gills they would use to process oxygen. So that's pretty cool. It's their way of breathing, if you will. We didn't mention that on the previous one. I guess it doesn't go for every one of the sandworms, but for these particular ones, you do. So what is probably the most interesting thing about the polychaetes is how beautiful they are, and they don't necessarily appear to be worms. They look a little different. If you were scuba diving and you saw one, you might not know it was a worm. All right, they look like this one. You can see a little bit like, almost like, I might guess an anemone or something when I saw that. Here, but look at, that's called the Christmas tree worm, and it's a worm. But all of those are little cilia driving everything into a mouth area there. Notice it has attached itself to, I don't know if that's a piece of coral or something right there. We have one called the feather duster. Oh. Do I not have? Oh yeah, it's video. Here's a feather duster. You see where it gets its name? Right. So there is that movement is probably due to water current that's in this fish tank right here. But you can see those little feathery things up there would be there to catch food. This is a real close relative of the tube worm that we'll see a little bit here. That's a feather duster, and then I have also a video. Huh. Oh, there it is. So notice it was hiding down there. Now its mouth parts are coming out. There it is, and there's our Christmas tree. So in times of stress, it can back itself back into that little substrate there and be protected. All right, and the most famous would be our tube worms. You can see right here, there's the tube, and then the worm part is the red part that comes out, and on the mouth right there, you can see that would be those little feathery parts of it that would come out for feeding. These guys are very interesting because they live in very deep ocean. In fact, we didn't know about them for a long time until we got vehicles that could go down there with lights to show on there. And these are the ones that survive off of those bacteria that are using not photosynthesis but chemosynthesis. Here's another picture. See how it feathers out? The red part feathers out. It's just kind of closed right there. Then they'll open it, and it'll be those feathery things there to collect some of the stuff they're getting from those bacteria. The lopophorates have something called a lopophore, which is sending those little things up there, ciliated tentacles for suspension feeding. In other words, whatever's floating by, they will catch that and eat that. They're suspension feeders. The bryozoans, most animals that make mossy animals that make a lace-like formation. The poronitas they build tubes, and the brachiopods make little shells, actually. So we're still in polychaetes, yeah?
Mhm.
Yeah. So that says here they're a very diverse group. Yeah, they sure are. And I have just a couple more pictures for you of these guys. I think mostly I want you to know about these that they're suspension feeders. In other words, they stick that little feathery thing up, and they catch the food in those that happens to be floating by, suspended in the water. All right. So we can see a bryozoa there. Looks like branching, right? This one looks like a piece of coral. Did I have a video there? Yeah, look at the little cilia there feeding. So anything that comes along, they can catch it.
So it's almost like it's moving in a line along the...
I know, but it's really just feeding, right? Yeah. So the horseshoe worm, it's called the horseshoe worm. It looks like that because it has some horseshoe shape there. It sits that little mouth out there, Poronita. There's one like the Christmas tree. Oh, this is the larval stage of it. And these guys swim around, right? So they look a little bit different. And these are our lamp shells, our brachiopoda, the lamp shells. And that's kind of cool. They look like little shells there. Okay, so I'm going to get your dissection stuff ready for you. So I do have dissection section.
I'm sorry, I'm really serious.
Materials. Does anybody need words back? Need words? Everybody good on words? I can turn this off. All right, and let's get started on our lab.